Russell over lunch, and I hope you guys had the opportunity to connect and meet with new friends from different areas. But this panel I'm very excited about. We've heard a lot from some of the landowners and some of the conservation efforts that are taking place in the West Texas region. And hearing from industry is so important in Texas. As most of you are likely aware, Texas has the 9th largest economy in the entire world. So we are the biggest energy producer, whether you are looking at oil and gas, whether you're looking at solar, whether you are looking at wind, we're up there on every single list. And our long-term vitality, our long-term economic outlook is really dependent on energy. And I liked what Russell had to say about Texas always being on the forefront. And so I'm excited to hear the perspective from these experts on some of the things that they're doing in working with landowners, in working with communities, and pushing the envelope for innovation within their portfolios and within the way that they interact with the land. So we are excited to hear from 4 different folks today. We're going to have Jesse Wood, who is the Director of Ecology and Sustainable Development at ConocoPhillips. He oversees stewardship activities and management of natural resources on over 195,000 acres in the Permian Basin. We're also going to hear from Stephen Brown, who has a career that's spent over 20 years in government relations, public affairs, and energy sustainability. He is currently the president of Capital Assets Energy, which is a successful clean energy development consulting firm specializing in financing retrofits of commercial, nonprofit, and multifamily properties with energy efficiency, efficient, and renewable energy improvements. So a little bit different perspective there. We'll have Faye Fitzsimons Walker, who currently serves as the Manager of Government Affairs and Community Engagement for APA Corporation, of which Apache Corporation is a subsidiary. And most of you know Faye. She also has a long history in West Texas from a ranching family. So she pairs her corporate and her government background with her heritage and how she grew up. And finally, we'll have Katie Kizzlar. She's the Assistant Director of Education and Outreach at the UT McDonald Observatory. Prior to the observatory, she held program and innovation roles at the Thinkery in Austin and at UT Engineering. She holds a BS in Civil Engineering from UT Austin. So please join me in welcoming Jesse first up.
Thank you, Joni. Can everybody hear me out there okay? All right, I'll take that as a yes. What I want to talk to you about, we heard got some pretty good insight with regard to the first panel, energy and conservation, can they coexist? And hopefully what you took away from that is that while we do have challenges, that energy and conservation can indeed coexist. And then with the second discussion revolving around minimizing the impact of energy development, with regard to ConocoPhillips, I feel like we've demonstrated the notion on our company on surface in the Permian Basin that we can minimize impact to our surface, and we can responsibly develop our natural resources. Another thing that we've talked about is renewable energy. And even with regard to the oil and gas industry, things evolve at such a rapid pace. Technology's always changing. And then you top that off with renewable energy development and what may be coming in the future. That's going to bring a whole new set of challenges. So that's what this summit's about, is to address these concerns. And I'm glad to be a part of this. What I want to do is discuss a little bit about what we've done, and this will be primarily at the grassroots level, to positively impact the health of ecosystems and biodiversity. And I won't spend a whole lot of time on these first few slides, but earlier in one of the talks, Chase Curry talked a lot about the importance of planning. And it was almost like we were sitting together, putting together our presentations, because a lot of what he said, you're going to hear here in my short talk. With regard to stewardship, obviously, we hold our natural resources in high regard, but before we can affect any change, we have to understand the variables that are at play. That includes future plans for development, soils, topography, climate, all the different factors that play a role. And in a semi-arid environment out here, a lot of the country that we manage, we receive in the neighborhood of 12 to 13 inches of rainfall a year. And I would say more often than not, we're into drought, and we get probably in the neighborhood of 7 to 8 inches a year. So we have to be really thoughtful about the way we not only develop our energy resources, but also implement our conservation plans, because the impact that you have on the landscape here, you're going to see those effects years down the road. So some of just a little outline here about some of the things that I'll talk about. Obviously, stewardship of our natural resources and conservation planning is key. And then also included in there is sustainable development. And then we also want to consider the impacts of development on habitats. The scale of the impact, how big is the area, what can we do to minimize the area that we impact, and then consider also the direct impacts, the physical disturbance, and the indirect impacts that may take place down the watershed or elsewhere. Within our conservation plans, we also identify best management practices that we believe are best suited to the landscape to achieve our goals. And a lot of that has to do, in the oil field, a lot of that is going to have to do with habitat restoration or reclamation. And then we also address invasive species concerns. Layman lovegrass, I believe, was mentioned earlier. I know Chase mentioned the issue in South Texas. There's a whole host of grass species down there that are invasive. And a big concern here in our neck of the woods is African rue as well. And then a key, and I'll try not to get too far off course, but without collaboration and research on our part, and also education, we're kind of, I won't say we're wasting our time, but it's important to us at ConocoPhillips to share the information that we glean from our research projects, because there's not a lot of literature out there for the Permian Basin in general. It doesn't have there aren't the resources available that there are in South Texas and some other areas. But we also want to educate and promote stewardship at events like this. At school events, it can be as simple as necropsy of a quail, so that we can educate the up-and-comers that are going to take our place later. Again, I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but before we can do anything else, we have to plan. We'd like to know the development plans with regard to renewable energy or oil and gas development. Within these plans, we identify our goals and objectives. Some of those are going to be to improve rangeland health. There will be target species that are involved, and I don't mean to shoot at them, but species that we want to improve habitat for. And in our case, that's all species. That's grassland birds, from a pronghorn to a mule deer to a white-tailed deer. One of the important elements is to monitor the effects of the practices that we put on the ground. We want to know if we're having a positive or a negative impact. If we seed at this time of year, what were the results as opposed to a different time of year, so that we can make educated decisions going forward. These are just a few of the management objectives. Some of them will be repetitive, but one of the pictures that Chase had on screen earlier was what looked like to me an area that they had identified that they wanted to protect. And we do the same thing at ConocoPhillips. There are certain habitats that are more sensitive than others. They're limited in size, and they may hold a whole host of a different suite of wildlife species than a neighboring vegetation type. So we go out of our way to identify those areas and do the best we can to protect those. We are ConocoPhillips. We do drill oil and gas wells. So one of our responsibilities is to facilitate development of the resources in a sustainable manner. And again, Chase hit on a lot of the things that I am going to talk about, you've already heard them once. Identifying, trying to create corridors to keep development, from straying out across the pasture. So, flow lines, underground pipelines, electric lines, trying to keep those confined to a reasonable area so that you can maximize usable space for wildlife and keep that connectivity between the habitat, for the habitat. Now the fun part. This is supposed to be about conservation success stories. These are a few things. Some of these projects are ongoing, but there are some here that are also that we feel like we've had some success with. Colin spoke earlier. We have a really great relationship with CKWRI and Texas Native Seeds, and have been a part of that program for 5+ years now in the Permian. That project to us, the attractiveness there is that there's a tangible benefit. So the products that come out of the West Texas Native Seeds project, Permian Basin Panhandle Native Seeds project, we can take that and apply it on our piece of ground with a reasonable hope of success. So we've really enjoyed that partnership. As a piece of the education and outreach that I talked about earlier, that gave us an opportunity to create to install a downtown demonstration plot with signage, so that, and it's even been recognized by Keep Midland Beautiful. But people are free to come out, take a look, see what's there, and read the signage and learn more about the program. Another thing that we did there is incorporate some of the native species, namely side oats grama, into our landscaping around the campus, so that others can see, how native species can be used not only in a rangeland setting, but also, in a bedded setting. And then we've also seen some benefits from publication, Livestock Weekly, which I do subscribe to, by the way. Just again, to spread the word about these different partnerships that are beneficial to the Permian Basin. So rolling right into reclamation and restoration work, I place these here because a lot of the native species that are developed by Texas Native Seeds, if we can get our hands on it, we include it in the mix. If it's available, we use it. These are a couple of locations. You can see January 2018, that's a caliche pit. If you know anything about a caliche pit in West Texas, not much grows there. So we went to some pretty extreme lengths, and it's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect out here in this environment, but you can see June 2019 what that location looked like after seeding and a little precipitation. On the bottom right there is a well location. It's easy to walk off and leave things be until there's a squeaky wheel. For us, we're as biologists and range specialists, we are the squeaky wheel. We just happen to work for ConocoPhillips also. So we seek out opportunities to create usable space for wildlife. And that's what you see on the bottom right here. This was just planted this past year. You can see the rows there where the drill went across, but we've already got some showing signs of success there. This is a frac pond on the right there. As you can see, this picture was taken June 15, 2021, and had some really nice success there, established a good stand of grass and native forage species. The flower you see there is onless bush sunflower. And the numbers of pollinators that, as you walk across these reclaimed, restored plots is pretty amazing to see. Not everything we do is focused on oil field locations, retired locations or sites. We're also land managers. This is across our surface assets. So we've done quite a bit of grassland restoration to the tune of over 1,000 acres planted with the locally adapted native seed sources, which are tailored to the soil type, the eco site. We do the best we can to find the right species for that site. And then brush management, 475, almost 500 acres of aerial mesquite control, over 2,000 acres of control of tarbush, and then over 1,000 acres of mechanical control of brush. A lot of these are associated with projects, plans that we put together to reconnect habitats. For instance, from one playa, restoring one playa where brush is encroached, connecting it with the next, stair-stepping down to the next, to increase usable space for black-tailed prairie dogs, pronghorn, the associated, the species that are closely associated with playas. I should point out the picture on the left. You may not be able to see it, but there's a drilling rig in the background, way back there. This is an area that we treated with tebuthyron, specifically trying to target tarbush. We went from in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 pounds per acre of herbaceous productivity there to in the neighborhood of 1,000. So this, again, we deem this a success. When Mother Nature works for you and you apply a practice, and then again, you receive timely rainfall, this shows you what the country can do and what the potential is. Again, this picture, Colin stole a little bit of my thunder, but I'll forgive him. This is the Gray Oak pipeline in Upton County. Again, seeded with a locally adapted seed mix. Seeded in 2019. This picture was taken, I believe, in June of 2021. Other partnerships that we've had that are important to us and that we hope to glean some information from is with regard to scaled quail research. We have Borderlands Research Institute conducting a study now that we hope to look at habitat use and how it relates to proximity to oil and gas development. So, and then also with the Rolling Plains Quail Research Foundation. We provided them with birds for translocation studies in the hopes of learning more about different release methods, dispersal from the release site, and also reproduction of those birds and effectiveness of those translocations that hopefully we can use that information for in the future. Another project that we have that's ongoing right now is you hear carbon sequestration, carbon storage constantly these days. So what we've done on our arid rangelands is we have an ongoing project with Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute, Tarleton State University, and Texas A&M AgriLife Research. And the goal of this study is to evaluate current carbon stores, and those are in areas that may have been treated with various practices as opposed to control areas where nothing has been done, and hopefully be able to model out over time what the potential is on these various soil types and ecosites. This one was fun. Burrowing owl habitat restoration. A lot of people ask, what in the world is an oil company doing restoring habitat for, well, wildlife in general, but who picked out burrowing owls? We have a number of playa lakes on our properties, and we partnered with WAFWA, Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, to restore habitat, again, reconnect some of these playas, install burrows to the tune of 80 burrows, that's 40 pairs. And then to go along with that, we completed brush management on about 75 acres in order to carry out this project. In terms of metrics, how do we determine if we've done any good or not? Well, in this case, it's pretty simple. Did the owls show up? Did they use the burrows? I will say that we already had some owls on site, but the birds have indeed used the burrows. Right now it's sitting around 20% occupancy. If you compare that with other studies, that's pretty close, not too far off. And we'll monitor in April and May of this year. It also offered us the opportunity to get involved with the Midland chapter of the Stewards of the Wild. We hosted them for a service event. They helped us install burrows. The same thing with our team, our internal team. Due to COVID, we couldn't have a lot of people out, but we had our management team out to help us with one of the phases. And to throw a plug out there for Texan by Nature, worked with Joni and her team and achieved certification for this project as well. A really neat thing. Texan by Nature is a great way to get the word out about the good things that are going on with industry, private lands. It doesn't really matter. If you don't know about them, I'd look them up. And again, it's a picture of success to me. There's owls. That little pile of rocks there's a burrow that was installed. And I'll try to wrap up. I think I'm over my time. But again, collaboration, research, and education. There are a lot of these projects. We have experienced biologists and range specialists on staff, but it's imperative that we partner with other like-minded organizations to improve, to steward our natural resources. We want to leave things better than we found them. And that's definitely a priority at ConocoPhillips. It was started with Concho Resources, and that continues today. And with that, I'll pass it on to Steve.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. The story that I'm going to share is probably more aspirational than anything else. And as Russell mentioned earlier today, or at least as he concluded his remarks, what we're trying to do here is to reorient the narrative a bit in a way that we might be able to identify new solutions to tackle old or emerging challenges. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And first, I'll give you a brief overview of kind of who I am and why I'm here, the problem that my organizations are trying to solve, what actually is community shared solar, which is, I guess, I'll let the cat out of the bag, but what it is, and then what future opportunities exist in Texas. So first, in 2018, I worked with a company called Lend-Lease. It was an Australian-based company to originate 500 megawatts of utility-scale solar in Fort Bend County, which is right outside of Houston. To my knowledge, I believe that we were, and still may be, the largest utility-scale project in the Houston zone. And the idea, the business model there was that we were trying to bring the solar closer to where the load is, right? And so the idea is that you can mitigate some of the transmission costs and, quite frankly, some of the other issues that have been addressed today if you can bring these projects closer to where the actual offtake is taking place. And with that project, we utilized well over about 3,000 acres of land. Some of it was non-commercial, so that worked out. In addition to that, I also serve as a consultant to a couple of public entities throughout the state with their green procurement strategies and their sustainability planning, and we do some advocacy work as well. But in 2021, I decided to extend what we're looking to do and create a nonprofit green investment firm that looked to deploy capital in places that would allow for the retrofitting of buildings to be more energy efficient so that we're consuming less energy, as well as to finance and develop community solar projects. Or they're called community solar, they're called community solar gardens, but essentially a smaller scale of what utility is, right? And so instead of doing 100 megawatt project somewhere in West Texas, you can do 25 megawatt projects closer in, right? And they could be rooftop, they could be over landfills, they could be taking a smaller footprint of land. in order to get these projects off the ground, and you connect them directly to the communities that will benefit from the projects themselves, right? And so there's that direct connectivity in place. And so that's what we're looking to do, and that's the aspirational part of this conversation today. So the problems that we're trying to solve is, one, about half of the households and half of the businesses cannot host a PV system on their rooftop, just based on the availability of their ability to do that on the rooftop. And that represents, solar itself represents about less than 10% of the electric generation capacity. Community solar right now is at about less than 5% of that 10%. And then community solar for low-income communities is about 1% of that 5%. So it's a very small sample size that we're working with throughout the country right now. But we do know that community solar has the ability to make power more accessible and affordable for communities, and also provides other supplementary type advantages around workforce development and resiliency that can be achieved through community solar. And then also just regionalizing solar generation, right? And so the projects themselves are directly connected to the communities that are benefiting from those projects. There are a number of different ways to define it. The Department of Energy defines it as an installation with multiple off-takers or owners referred to as subscribers. And these subscribers enter into a contractual relationship with the owner or operator of the installation to receive some or all of the financial returns from a predefined share of the installation's output. So basically, what you see the picture on the right is an example of a community solar project, right? It doesn't look like what we think of when we think of, kind of these utility scale projects. It could be something that's creative as a solar tree, for instance, that might be able to power a number of households nearby, okay? And also provide for energy savings for families as well. Another key component of community solar is that if we can grow it at the same proportion as the rest of distributed PV, there will be approximately 8 megawatts by 2025 and 21 megawatts by 2030. If we were to accelerate that between 22 and 2025, we can increase those numbers by another 2 gigawatts of power. And so it's really truly an untapped model that I'm hoping the state of Texas would look at pursuing as a way to mitigate some of the issues that we've talked about today, and kind of begin the process of reorienting the narrative through this story. And if you can see the map of kind of where community solar is right now throughout the country, and we do have some projects in Texas. You can see states like Florida and New York and other places really have taken this on and are leveraging these opportunities to generate power through renewable resources in the communities that those resources are being served by. So by the end of 2020, there were at least about 3 gigawatts of community solar capacity distributed across about 1,600 projects in 39 states and in Washington, D.C. Cumulative community solar capacity has grown by about 121% year over year since 2010, and about 1,000 megawatts came online in 2020 alone. Now, there are challenges. I mean, these projects aren't easy, particularly in this landscape, and we are eagerly trying to find a scalable model for community solar in Texas. Obviously, we need for supportive legislation that will help to advance and maybe even provide some incentives to site projects closer to the communities that are being served. We want to make sure that we can streamline permitting and interconnection issues. And then, of course, there's financial challenges, which is what the Texas Clean Energy Fund is working to overcome as well. But the opportunities for it, we believe that rest in the ability to advocate for state programs to grow community solar in the state. Virtual net metering is also an opportunity to incentivize community solar. And basically what that is, it's net metering, which is a credit that if you have rooftop solar, it's a credit that you get for any excess power that you generate that you don't use. Well, in the case of community solar, the power isn't connected to your rooftop, but it is connected to your meter. And so what virtual net metering does is exactly the same thing. It allows for you to get a credit for any excess power that's generated that's not actually consumed through your meter. And so that's another tool that will help to incentivize it. And then again, I mentioned before, streamlining the permitting and interconnection rules. And then obviously, you know, with our work works from a lens of how we can help to make clean energy more accessible and affordable to in low to moderate income communities. And so through that lens, there's additional steps that can be taken to provide for specific carve-outs for low to moderate income communities as it relates to any community solar laws that might be drafted next session. Obviously a tariff or some type of incentive could help as well. And then, you know, any help that we can get with project financing will go a long way into accelerating this idea in the state. And then lastly, the path forward will really depend on building a statewide coalition of folks who see the value in having a diversity in energy resources throughout the state, but having that diversity be reflected in a diversity of geographies throughout the state. And really that's what we're trying to accomplish. We have a lot of different markets in the state. We have municipally owned utilities, we have retail electric providers, we have co-ops, and community solar will look differently in all three of those markets. And so being able to identify, you know, what works where and scale that in those markets will be important. And then also, you know, developing the muscle memory and the reps around technical assistance so that communities can be helped with organizing their communities and raising the resources to be able to do these types of projects, as well as resource building, which of course means working with not only the public sector and private sectors, but also philanthropy and looking at foundations who might be interested in helping to deploy some capital to make sure that all families and communities have access to renewables. And so here's my contact information, and that's the end of my presentation. So I think at this time we'll allow for our next speaker to come up, but thank you for the time, and look forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Can you all hear me okay? Great. Well, thank you all so much for having me here today. I have to specifically acknowledge Billy and Melinda and the Respect Big Bend team because they invited Apache to the table what feels like yesterday, but it was a couple moons ago to have these conversations around what responsible development looks like. And we are very grateful to have a seat at that table. I think it's very easy. It would have been very easy to not include an oil and gas exploration and production company that does just that. We only explore for and produce hydrocarbons, but you know, I think the conversations like these open up a lot of opportunity. So I just want to acknowledge that we're proud and we're happy to be part of this. So today I'm actually going to focus on Apache's approach to engaging with communities. Part of the Respect Big Bend effort obviously was very, very focused on the conservation of lands and habitat, specifically, you know, how energy companies work with landowners. But another component of that is how do energy companies work with communities, because obviously there is an impact on communities, and how do companies better assess the values that those communities where they're operating, and what matters to them, and making sure that those companies are engaging in responsible ways. So I'm taking a little bit of a different approach here, and then obviously I'm going to bring up my friend Katie from McDonald Observatory. So many of you know Apache. Many of you might not know, though, that we are a global exploration and production company. I know that Alpine High and the announcement of Alpine High about 6 years ago really drew a lot of consternation for many good reasons. Back in 2016, there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of questions. What's going on in this new frontier, southern Delaware Basin of southern Reeves County? But what I want to talk about today is, if you can, separate a little bit the market considerations for what we now, what we call Alpine High, from the social and environmental license to operate that Russell talked about earlier, because that is truly what we were facing, and what we thought was an exciting new moment for the company actually ended up being what we looked at as an existential one from a social license to operate perspective. And so what it really forced us to do was to think proactively about how we engage with communities and how we plan, because this is what this forum is about today. How do we plan and actually make a difference in those communities where we're operating and not being reactive? So the idea is, Alpine High, while it looks a lot different from an operational footprint than it did in 2016, 2017, we are now applying a lot of those engagement principles to other parts of the world and looking to export a lot of that to our new frontier exploration in other parts of the world. So before I get a lot of eye rolls on this slide, because as has been talked about a lot today, is ESG. I think one of the most important takeaways about ESG right now, and especially for this room and landowners and conservation groups and folks looking for ways to partner with oil and gas companies specifically and energy companies, is that this is a really important, I really encourage, if there are certain companies that you're looking to partner with, really look into their ESG goals and commitments. Because what is underpinning these ESG commitments is capital. So they have capital to put to work in these specific commitments. And I'm just, putting Apaches up here for reference. But ESG is also not new. It's something that we've coalesced around due to investor pressure, obviously, which Russell mentioned earlier. But the way that we look at it is we're taking a lot of what we were doing in Alpine High 5 years ago and really focusing it around, okay, how do we put this into what is now called ESG and take it to other parts of the world where we operate. So another thing here too is to look at how companies talk about their short and long-term goals. We focus at Apache on short-term goals because we feel very strongly that those are what we can control today. That's, when we set a goal at the beginning of last year to end routine flaring in U.S. onshore by the end of last year, we felt like that was an achievable goal. We set it, we met it. We have a goal this year related to reducing 40% routine flaring in Egypt, for instance. Those short-term goals, short and medium-term goals, we feel very strongly that we have control over. A lot of companies are making, obviously, net zero pledges and things like that, but our ethos and our mindset is that we are going to focus on the short to medium term. And then also tie it to compensation. I think that was a point made earlier. Really look at how these companies are putting these goals forth. All of our ESG compensation, or ESG goals, specifically our GHG reduction goals, are tied to compensation, everybody's compensation, mine included. And then I think one point about long-term goal setting here is we look at, it's important to set long-term goals, but we also want to be thinking about the long-term landscape of energy. So a big theme here today is this is about balance. This is not about absolutes. You're not a conservationist, which means, you don't like energy, and if you like energy, you hate the environment. This is about balance. In the long term, we know that there will be a demand for petroleum products. So everything requires a sacrifice. And I think we do the general public a disservice when we talk about things in absolutes. So for instance, the energy transition. The idea of a transition means that you're going to be completely moving away from said product, when in reality, it's an energy evolution. And we've talked a lot about that today too. We're going to be needing all of the above energy solutions to meet demand and doing it in a way that minimizes our environmental impact. So I think we need to be recalibrating the conversation for the public, because one day somebody's going to wake up and say, wait, I thought that we were supposed to be transitioning away from fossil fuels. And what about this clean energy? These rare earth minerals come from, we talked about the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's always going to be a sacrifice. And I think we've got to start being honest about those conversations, about what the balance means for the long-term, our long-term energy mix, because it will be long-term. It will be a mix of long-term to meet our energy needs. So here I have an example of kind of how we've approached our partnerships specifically how we did approach our partnerships in Alpine High. And like I said, we're looking to kind of export this ethos to other parts of the world where we operate. And first and foremost, I think it's finding partners who are solution-oriented. So being in search of a solution instead of a problem is probably one of the most important tenets of a successful partnership for us and our conservation partners that we engaged with over the past six, seven years in Southern Reeves County. And, a lot of this is on our part. It's being responsive. I think in the industry, we get a bad rap for not being responsive. So hopefully, being responsive to those media inquiries, or being responsive to those media inquiries about our impact, and acknowledging that we're not perfect. We know we're not perfect, and they might not like the answer, but at least we showed up to the table, and at least we were there when they asked. And then I think most importantly, the listening and the learning aspect. We did a lot of work early on in 2016 to map out stakeholder concerns. A lot of like what Respect Big Bend has done is map out what the community cares about. Obviously, top of mind, I don't have to tell anybody who remembers this time, obviously the springs and the park were top of mind for people. So we listened to that and responded accordingly. And then of course, with listening comes hopefully learning. And we had a community advisory committee, which was an example of how we responded and listened and learned in the community. One of our former community advisory committee members is actually here in the audience, which made me really excited. But it was actually how we put that into practice, is having regular touch points and regular meetings with the community, so that there was that back and forth discussion about what they were saying or what they were hearing about what was going on in the community and how we could respond. The other component is obviously educating and engaging. So we had a very robust rig tour program, which we hope we can bring back with more activity. Obviously, I asked you all to suspend kind of the market considerations for Alpine High with kind of the reality of the above ground social and environmental license issues. But obviously the reality in 2018, 2019 is NGL prices cratered. That's what we were dealing with. But now as prices start to come back up, we obviously hope that means that there'll be more activity, and we can keep doing this engagement on an ongoing basis. And then, I think these are just 3 examples of partners that we've engaged with over the years. I'm going to focus on one of them, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention BEG, because obviously they're here today and they're a very integral partner for us in terms of our research, groundwater in Southern Reeves County. But Michael and his team are fantastic and have been really great to work with in terms of how they've approached working with an oil and gas company. So the observatory, there are a couple of components here, and I think one of the most important is the management and executive leadership commitment. That obviously doesn't grow on trees. You can't just like will it into being. You really hope that you've got the management and the executive leadership to set the stage and the tone for what you're going to do. So when we announced Alpine High, we heard the worry about the impact on the dark skies, and so we had our management team go out to the observatory about a week after our announcement, take a tour, listen and learn, and that kind of set the stage for the executive team saying, you will focus on this matters, and we need to do what it takes to make things right here. So, and then I think the second one, and this really involves a lot of humility and a lot of patience, is continuous improvement, because knowing, we knew going into this that this wasn't going to be a one and done project. You're constantly working on your lighting practices and making sure that they're not impeding the dark skies. And I'm going to mention a couple of times a fellow by the name of Bill Wren, who I would assume many in the audience know, but Bill he is an amazing man. He just is no longer with the observatory. He's since retired, and he deserves that, because he is one of the most hardworking people I know. And Bill's approach was that it was about continuous improvement and that partnership. And it's okay if you make a mistake, but as long as we're willing to come to the table with that solution-oriented mindset, we'll be okay. And we're just eternally grateful for that approach. And then obviously investing in education, internal and external. So we had continuous trainings and things for our contractors, our drilling contractors, and the public, to really talk about the specifics of dark skies friendly lighting, what that is, how you have to invest in certain lights, where you point them, and a lot of it is where you point the light, and making sure that that's on a continual basis, because you get new that's one of the biggest problems, is getting new contractors in who are not educated. And so baking that into our system was really important, and Bill was incredibly important to that process. And then finally, routine assessments. I've got an example there of an old assessment back from 2017 or 2018, when we were, at the height, running about 13 rigs. There was, at one point, I think 2,500, 3,000 lights a week that the environmental health and safety team was checking, and all in constant communication with Bill Wren at the observatory. And I will say, Bill's approach was wonderful, and it was one of, I think, the best way that I can explain it is, when you come to the table not only with a solution-oriented mindset, but a mutual respect for your distinct scientific disciplines, it goes a long way. So Bill and his team at the observatory knew that we had a job to do, that our team, are professionals, geologists and drilling engineers, and they, and then our team understood that they had a job to do, obviously above ground, and ours below. And it also didn't hurt that every single time Bill visited a rig, he and his wife brought cookies. So it was well known within the company, when Bill came, everyone was going to be well taken care of by Janice and Bill. And then I just want to quickly talk about the benefits that we realized. There was a comment earlier about how do you get corporations to the table in these conservation initiatives and partnerships. Well, it's, I'm not going to say it's simple, but the other side also has to come to the table with what's the return on the investment. And for us, and what the observatory team came to us with, was very clear. You increase the efficiency of your lights. It's a better light. It means it decreased costs. It improves safety because it decreased glare. And then also you have the added benefit of reducing light pollution for the observatory, which was obviously the end goal. And so I think, there's the social and environmental license to operate, but ultimately at the end of the day, this has to make sense for the company as well. And I think when partners can come to the table with that mindset, knowing that this is a business and they need to run it as so, it helps in being able to move these initiatives along. And I actually just want to make a personal comment actually on the how do you get corporations to the table? And this kind of came out of a conversation Joni and I just had before we started. And it was around workforce and, you know, how do you get companies to the table on these general conservation ethics, whether it be conservation organizations like the McDonald Observatory or the way that a company approaches engaging with landowners. It's hiring people who understand conservation ethics, who understand the land, who understand what it means to actively manage the land. And I think, at least speaking for oil and gas, we're having a really hard time hiring the younger generations because they've been told that oil and gas is a sinking Titanic and it doesn't have a future. I don't think that because I believe and I know, and as Russell pointed out earlier, the data, it proves it. You know, petroleum products are going to be around for a long time, and I feel strongly that it is part of global progress and getting many people in the world out of poverty, and also a big component of just education and everything that we hold dear in the society. I know that, but a lot of other folks my age and younger are being told that that's not the case. And so if there are people like Jesse and I who have a land conservation, land ethics background that are encouraged to explore these jobs in energy and specifically oil and gas, I think we're going to have more opportunity for connection and more opportunity for partnership down the line. And then I'm just going to end with a plug, and then I'm going to pass it over to Katie to talk about the Dark Skies Festival that Apache is a part of at the end of this month. And we're very, very excited about it, and we hope everybody will come. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie. Thank you all.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Kizzlar. I'm the Associate Director for Education and Outreach at McDonald Observatory, and I'm here as industry, but slightly different, I guess, than other types of industry represented. We also sort of accidentally got into the conservation area, so coming at it from a little bit of a different angle here. But I've got featured up here on the screen a picture of McDonald Observatory. How many folks have been out to visit us before? Quick show of hands. Oh, good. Oh, good. I'm glad. Okay, well, this is all actually just an invitation to come again. So we are a fully operational scientific campus. So you can see 3 of our major telescopes there in the picture. We have a number of others. We are on sky every clear night of the year. So while we join you in praying for rain, we hope it happens during the daytime so that astronomers hate clouds. It's just a damage to what we can do. And to throw in my own 25-year-old joke, our telescopes here in the foreground, you can see the original telescope that was constructed in 1939. Our second telescope came in the late 60s. And then on that far hill, the Hobby-Eberly telescope, second in the class, it's second largest in the world, turned 25 years old this year. So our 25-year-old is leading our research on trying to understand the expansion of the universe, so doing a pretty good job. So what I'm here to talk about, though, is this aspect of the observatory and preserving our dark skies. So they are essential not only to the work that we do, but they are awe-inspiring to people who come out to the Big Bend region. And it's what really brought me to this position. I love talking to people about science and science discovery, but I love these night skies, and I love the environment of West Texas. And so we want to protect this not only for our scientific research, but also because it's our home. There's about 70 of us who live on site at the observatory, 100 of us work there full time. This is what we live and breathe. And so Bill Wren was mentioned. He has just retired from the observatory after 30 years of service, and he really built our Dark Skies initiative. So this is an image of just the growth that you can see across, the U.S. Between the 50s night sky and that in, I think, 1997. So this is something that observatories have had to think about since they came into operation. There are a number of observatories in the U.S. and around the world that no longer have a productive night sky because of the encroachment of development. When the observatory was really starting to look at this, we were talking with our community neighbors. So, whether it was going to Sol Ross and saying, hi, can we talk about the parking lot lighting? And oh, we'll help you pick out the light fixture that you might need. Or getting some investment to put in those orange kind of sulfur lights that you see in Marfa that just you can't even buy those anymore. They don't exist, but they're part of the culture of that city now. So that's where we really started with just how do you talk to people around you about what light pollution is, why it's important to the observatory. And then our neck of the woods started getting a lot more popular and people started moving out. So this image shows you between 2010 and 2012, you can see the light growth right there around that red dot in the center, which is McDonald Observatory. And so this is where we really needed to start thinking about not just talking to our friends and our neighbors, our community leaders, but the new neighbors who were coming in, and the new folks that were coming to this region. And the oil and gas was a big part of that. So actually in 2011, the state of Texas passed a law that said that the 7 counties surrounding McDonald Observatory should have lighting ordinances that preserve the night sky. And to us, that was a big win, because wow, the state of Texas is looking at us and thinking about dark skies. But we didn't want that to become something where we go around holding up this piece of paper that says you've got to follow the rules and preserve our skies. It really was that let's show up with a plate of cookies and explain what this lighting ordinance means and why it's in place and what you can do to help us with preserving the night skies. So from there, in 2015, Bill Wren actually published a paper in the Petroleum Engineering Society with a Pioneer Energy talking about, what is dark skies. We got involved with Texan by Nature, really helped us to connect with the industry so that we could have these conversations about what it was that we were trying to do and what it meant from an industry standpoint. Should have skipped forward here. So this is 2020. You can really see that the growth is coming. So one of the big things that we want to make sure that we're communicating with folks is Dark Skies Initiative is not about necessarily no light. So dark skies doesn't mean it has to be total darkness and we don't want any development and everybody go away. Sometimes scientists kind of have that personality, but that's not actually what we're all about. We want to talk about how, as development is happening around us, how can we work together? How can we help you to grow in a way that preserves the night skies and also we think ends up helping the businesses that are coming to join us. So I would be remiss if I didn't actually do a quick little bit of education. So how can you be night sky friendly? There's 4 major elements. You mentioned, really it's mostly about where you point the light. So shielding and aiming your light is kind of the very first thing. Don't point it up into the sky, doesn't do you any good there, and it creates light pollution. Use a warmer color temperature if possible. If you're pointing the light in the right direction, you end up not needing as much of it. It doesn't have to be so bright because you're pointed at what you're trying to look at, and then turn off the lights when you don't need them. So really, we're not trying to go out and tell people to completely change what they're doing or stop what they're doing. We're just trying to point out some pretty simple ways that you could improve lighting practices, or we think so. An example from an industry site where the basic idea of just aiming your lights where they're supposed to go can make a difference. So this is WPX, the Lindsay compressor station, and I'll read you the quote here. The employees love it. One commented that they could actually see the equipment and where they were working now. So they have plans to implement this site-wide, and this is an older picture, but you can see in that first side the glare of the light shining right in your face, those big bright white lights. And then in the second picture you can see that the ground is actually illuminated with that light, which is really the main point of what we're asking folks for. And as Faye mentioned, here's somebody from industry saying, our employees love this. We don't have light shining in our face. I can see where I'm going. From a management side, if you can use less lighting, even from a planning standpoint, maybe you're going to save some money. That's great. From an environmental side, we're not creating light pollution any longer. That's really great, not only for the observatory, but also we know this impacts, migratory birds, other wildlife impacts. I mean, everybody here probably has a phone in their pocket that has a setting that is night mode, right? Your phone tells you you should not be looking at blue lights right before you go to bed, that you should shift that to a warmer color temperature. So we know this is also better for ourselves as well. So we really do like to focus on the win-win possibilities of thinking about preserving dark skies. So talking specifically about how we worked with Apache. So not only were they very welcoming in site visits, in receiving many plates of cookies from Bill and Janice, but they also, stepped up and made some changes and were able to serve as sites to show how this could be done really well. And then they further stepped up and said, Bill and Janice can't make cookies for the entire oil and gas industry. How are you going to scale this? How is the observatory going to continue on? Also, yeah, Bill's tired and is going to retire at some point, so how are you going to keep this going? So working together, we looked at how can we take what we have learned from working with our local communities, from working with industry stakeholder partners, and scale that and make sure that we really have a long-lasting Dark Skies Initiative program. And through some generous funding from Apache, we were able to do that, to take a couple of different steps. First thing, we actually looked to our friends at Texan by Nature and their certification program and replicated a similar program for night sky friendly lighting recognition. So this is anybody, whether it's a business, a homeowner, the courthouse, can basically be nominated or nominate themselves to be recognized by McDonald Observatory as having night sky friendly lighting. And what this means is not just, I've done a good job, give me an award, but it actually opens up the conversation for, I think we're doing good, I want to be doing good, can you tell me if I'm doing it right? And then, we can send staff out who will take pictures, who will talk with you and say, oh, if you actually made this little change, you'd be great. And so working together, we can tell someone, yes, this is how you can make an improvement. And then we like to go and shout from the rooftops that what a good job our friends have done. So we give them an award, a plaque, a sticker, a poster, and then we do some press release about that as well. We've produced brochures and pop-up banners and many kind of exhibits that we can take out to community events and festivals. And actually now we're offering to have those placed in our partner locations. So the Presidio County Courthouse can have its own Dark Skies Initiative poster to talk about how they're being involved in this process as well. We did a lot of work on creating consistent language in lighting ordinances in the area. And that sounds pretty boring, but it's actually a really great takeaway that we got from our partners at Apache. Y'all are working not only in multiple counties in the region, you're working internationally. Please don't make me follow 12 different rules for all of our different sites. Can you get some consistency in this, and can you make it really simple to follow? Not only so I have a roadmap for how I can do better, but also so I can communicate it really easily to my team about these are the standards, this is what we should be doing. Again, we never want ordinances or these types of structures to be something that we're using to come after somebody. We always want them to be something that we can use as a megaphone. So here are the best practices, it's written down, let us help you with them. We had town hall meetings to explain what these lighting ordinances meant, how you could abide by them, why it was important. Just a lot of community outreach. We integrated this content into work we were doing in K-12. So we have teacher workshops where teachers come out to visit the observatory in the summer. And we started to integrate the Dark Skies Initiative work into those workshops as well. We now have K-12 activities teachers can take back to their classroom. So this can spread beyond just the observatory itself. And then very exciting, we are about to put in place and unveil a brand new permanent exhibit at the Visitor Center that will be focused on preserving dark skies. And then as was mentioned, we also have a festival to celebrate that opening later this month. So our Dark Skies exhibit will be opening at the Dark Skies Festival on April 29th and 30th at the end of this month. And like I said, this is a permanent exhibit in our facilities that in good years see 75,000 visitors a year. We think over the lifespan of this exhibit will impact 1 million people getting to come in and learn more about dark skies. And then our background work to all of this, the community organizing, the changing the lighting ordinances, the bringing in other stakeholders to help them understand why dark skies is important, really helped to build the case for making a really strong application to the International Dark Skies Association for a dark sky reserve in this area. So there's a governing body that looks at preserving dark skies, and they will come in and certify an area as being protecting of dark skies and also maintaining those dark skies. This should be a press release announcement tomorrow, but you're all getting a preview of this. We have been granted, our application was approved for the Greater Big Bend International Dark Sky Reserve. So this is really big news within our world, but we think within conservation in general. So this dark sky reserve will be 15,000 square miles, which is actually the largest dark sky reserve in the world. It's larger than all of the other reserves that exist currently combined. And although all dark sky reserves are referred to as international, this is actually the first dark sky reserve that does cross an international border. So we were able to bring partnership with that. And I would love to be able to pull up the maps that we had earlier today, showing sort of where is the high value areas of Permian Basin, because I think if you actually put the dark sky reserve map on top of that, you would see a lot of alignment with those values, which I thought was really exciting to see as well. So again, I said that this is really mostly a commercial and an invitation to come see us. While we have had success and are excited to see continued success of expanding education and outreach around dark skies and how people can be involved in preserving them, we know that really the best way to make that connection is to have somebody come out and experience these dark skies with us. We know that there is a lot more action coming back to this region, and we have a lot of new friends to make. I'm gonna work on my mass cookie baking skills, but I can't promise everybody will get a plate of cookies when they come to visit, but we'll try really hard. So I'm gonna leave actually with an introduction to my colleague, Stephen Hummel, who is our Dark Skies Initiative Coordinator. He's here today, and I didn't ask if I could put his contact information up, but there it is. Quickly take it down. It's available everywhere. Actually, really reach out to us. This is the way that we connect best, is to have folks come out and visit, experience the dark skies, hear more from us. If you have questions about anything, we are happy to share our resources to talk through, to come out and look at your lighting even. And I will give one more final plug. And thank you to Apache Corporation for the support, for the vision to know that this type of a relationship could be something successful not only for us, but for others as well. And I will say, other observatories are now asking us, how do you work with industry? Can you give us pointers? Can you tell us how we do this? So the work that was started here and really helping to impact our region not only is going to have impacts globally because Apache is going to take those practices into what they're doing, but also on the scientific side. This is something that we're going to continue to spread through every visitor who comes through, every person who wants to learn about the universe, but then also other people within our same line of work. How can you collaborate with your stakeholders so that you can, both be successful and good stakeholders of your land? That's it.
So I think we have just a couple of minutes for questions, if anyone has questions before we wrap this panel up.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Brown, is it not true that the majority of solar panels are manufactured in China?
Do you hear my answer? Yeah. I said it's true that China manufactures a lot of things that we consume.
Other questions?
The map you congratulations on the international application being approved, by the way. The map you showed of, I think, the 15,000 acres, was it? To the north and east is obviously the Permian Basin, and the observatory very close. I live in the Davis Mountains, so very close to that side. And I know being up there at night, and I look off to the north and east, and I can see light. So how is the light off to the northeast up toward the Permian Basin? Is it continuing to affect on the dark skies? And is there, are there initiatives going that direction to try to continue to deal with that? Does that make sense? Okay.
So, and I should have said that, thank you for asking the question, because I should have said that while we have seen that growth in light pollution, and you can see, light on the horizon, our skies are still astronomically, I would say almost perfect, but we still have fantastic dark skies where we are. So even though we're starting to see that light creep in on the horizon, and you can see it there, within the area of the night sky we're doing our observing, we're still doing really, really well. And that's why we need to work now before we get continued growth. And you were asking about the northeast side, I'm sorry.
Up toward the Permian Basin, if you look at that map, we were going more after
Yes.
that direction. I mean, I'm on those roads, I can see the lights on those roads, and I just didn't know how much it was affecting.
Yes. So yes, we can see those lights, and that Melinda was actually saying this, that when she came out for a tour, they walked around the catwalk of the 82-inch, and when you're facing one direction, you can see El Paso's glow, you can see a little bit of the cities, then as you come around and face back up towards the Permian, you can really see that glow. So it is something that we are seeing, that encroachment, we are seeing that light brighter, and we are measuring some change, but again, our science skies are still doing really, really well.
Are there other questions? If not, I have one last wrap up, and this will be fast. Sorry to say, you'll have 30 seconds. But particularly from our three industry folks, could you just give your perspective on where the need for innovation and collaboration is with the landowners, communities, and conservation organizations you're working with? What do you need to continue to push forward? Is it, you can't hear? Okay. Is this any better? Okay. So I asked, from the standpoint of working with communities, conservation organizations, and landowners, what's next for industry? What do they need from us in terms of collaboration and innovation? We'll start with Faye.
I mean, I would just reiterate. Can you all hear me? This is weird. Hello? I would reiterate what I said about coming to the table with solutions and doing the research on what the companies are trying to achieve, like either through their ESG goals or certain stated initiatives that they want to focus on. I think it's really hard sometimes when somebody comes to you and says, like, I have this great idea, and then, in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I have. So there's, from GHG emissions monitoring, specifically methane, to water recycling initiatives. There's, it's helpful when partners come to the table having already read and understood like what our objectives are. Not to say that we can focus on things that are outside of that purview. That's not the case at all. That's absolutely something that the company side should consider. But it's just helpful when the industry partners and communities kind of come to the table understanding the background.
From my perspective, I think, continued collaboration is key, number one. And in order to affect any kind of change, you have to work across the fence line. So it is, we do focus a lot on our piece of ground or the piece of ground that you may own or it owns you, however you want to look at it. But that continued collaboration, Parks and Wildlife has set a pretty good example with cooperatives over the years. landowners working together, stakeholders coming together, just like we did for Respect Big Bend, identifying concerns, and then working together with all the stakeholders to address those concerns. Over the past 4, 5, 6 years, it's really become more evident to me, probably should have been more evident long before that, that you need to have a seat at the table, and everybody that's involved should have a seat at the table to give their perspective.
Well, thank you guys. It's obvious from what each of you have shared today, whether it's seeking first to understand, which is, how we started the day, to the collaboration aspect, to planning. I think we heard that from every single panelist up here. There's a lot of opportunity to continue to grow industry, but be incredible land stewards at the same time. So if you would join me in thanking the panelists.